Next, let's take a closer look at some of the subregions of Africa. This is the transitional zone that we looked at earlier, and the most populated part is West Africa, including the largest country, Nigeria, and some other significant countries. We also have equatorial Africa in the middle, well, as you might guess, along the equator. East Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania, and then the countries of Southern Africa. And so let's take a closer look at that. Okay, this is a closer view of West Africa. A couple things to note. We have the country of Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast. And let's take a closer look at Nigeria. Nigeria is the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa, actually the largest in Africa. And you have oil resources in the south, and you have sort of a ethnic religious divide between north and south as well, that you have a more Christian south and more Islamic north. And what this is showing is where areas where Sharia law is proclaimed and where you have attacks by a group called Boko Haram. So you have essentially an insurgency and ethnic as well as religious differences between different parts of Nigeria. So Nigeria is the most populated country in Africa. It has well over 180 million people, probably approaching 200 million now. Might be a bit out of date. Nigeria is a former British colony, and one thing about it is you have a combination of 3 major nations of people and 250 nationalities. You have a major split between North and South, and with a group called Boko Haram, sort of a insurgency or terrorist group operating in the north. And Nigeria became independent fairly early in 1960. These are some of the different cultural groups in Nigeria. And we talked about how we had these borders superimposed on these different ethno-linguistic groups. This is particularly true in the country of Nigeria. You have a lot of different people that are kind of packed together in a single political entity. Here's a bit better map of ethno-linguistic groups in sub-Saharan Africa. And you can see sort of the patchwork of different colors converge around this one political boundary in Nigeria. And there's a lot of tension in the country, especially in the north. If you've heard stories in the news about girls being kidnapped from school or attacks on villages, this is mostly in sort of the northern corner of Nigeria. Another important country in West Africa is Ghana, which was formerly the Gold Coast. That was the name under the British in the late 1950s. Over here is Liberia, and Liberia is unique because of its unique association with the United States, that it was established by the United States American Colonization Society, and it was established as a place for freed slaves to return to in the 1800s. For freed slaves in the United States, it was established as a place that they could return to. It's hard to stereotype Africa. You have, places like these nice gated communities. You have a mix of different, you have marketplaces. We oftentimes tend to think of Africa as universally poor, but there is a real mix of rich and poor in Africa. This is a view. We're now moving east into East Africa. We have Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania. Ethiopia has the second largest population in sub-Saharan Africa, around 94 million people. That may be higher now. I haven't updated this in a while, so let's say close to 100 million people. And one thing we noted, and that during the colonial era, that Ethiopia successfully resisted colonization. So it really stands out in that regard. It was a fairly powerful kingdom, and it was able to hold back the Italians, which had intended to colonize it. Down here we have Kenya, and Kenya is becoming more and more important economically in Africa. It has economically important cities such as Nairobi, which is considered sort of a Silicon Valley of Africa, important technology hub. We have Mombasa, which is becoming increasingly important for trade in Africa. It's becoming an important port city for connecting Africa with the outside world. This is a marketplace in Kenya where clothing is being resized and sold. If you did take home assignment 2, there was a podcast about the afterlife of a t-shirt, and I encourage you to, this is a figure from that, I encourage you to kind of listen to that. And there's an interesting story about how clothing eventually makes its way from places like the United States to places like Africa and ends up having a second life there. And lastly, Madagascar over here, as we mentioned earlier, it was settled by people from Southeast Asia, and also settled much later, around 2,000 years ago, and has major linguistic differences than the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. This is a figure showing the sort of human movement over time. Humans have been in sub-Saharan Africa for hundreds of millions, hundreds of thousands of years, not millions, sorry, only 2,000 years ago. Back again. This is a figure from the book showing some of the highlands in East Africa. This is an area called the Horn of Africa, which is included, I believe, in the previous chapter, but it includes Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia. As we get into the middle, or equatorial Africa, we have the DR Congo. This used to be a Belgian colony under King Leopold, and then it's part of where King Leopold was operating, and some others like Gabon. And one thing to note here, these are oil resources that are abundant in areas like Gabon and down here in Angola. So the dominant country here is the DR, or Democratic Republic of Congo. It's the big country here, and we also have places like South Sudan, which gained its independence from the other part of Sudan and fairly recently in 2011. And then we have countries like Gabon, where most of Gabon's economy depends on oil resources. Next, in Southern Africa, we have going from Angola to Namibia, South Africa, Mozambique. And Southern Africa is a resource-rich region. This is where a lot of the mineral resources are, such as gold and diamonds. You have oil resources up here in Angola. We also have the Republic of South Africa, which is one of the BRICS. It is the S in BRICS. And it is one of the top economies in Africa and one of the most connected to the outside world. The largest economy is actually in Nigeria because of its oil wealth, but South Africa is probably one of the more better connected of the economies in Africa. One thing about South Africa is that it had both an indigenous black and also European white population, and practiced a policy called apartheid, or legal racial separation here, which was a big part of its history until the 1990s. So here we see the different parts of South Africa. Also note this odd country called Lesotho, which exists inside of South Africa. This is a brand new city being built due to oil wealth in Angola. And that's a quick overview of some of the regions of sub-Saharan Africa. And there's more to it. I encourage you to read the rest of the book.